And I'll say hello as well. So hi everybody. My name's Helen Bevan, and I am going to be leading today's session with Kathryn, as I've done in the previous 2 weeks, and just really looking forward to a fantastic final live session today for the School for Change Agents. And anybody who has just joined us, we'd love you to just say hello in the chat box. So, you know, just to say who you are, where you're from, what's happening where you are, what you're looking forward to about the session today, but really pleased that you're with us.
Helen, you know, one of the loveliest things about getting to this stage is you can sort of see people's comments as they're finishing the School for Change Agents. And a few people have been taking screenshots of themselves as they finish their Future Learn page and posting about their light bulb moments. It's lovely to see, isn't it? We like those, so keep them coming.
Yeah. What I think's great is, you know, I mean, obviously so much work goes into into school, and I think that more than anything else, just knowing that it's impactful and making a difference for people, yeah, it means more to us than almost anything. So seeing those, people at the final stage, seeing all our participants, all our fellow change agents finishing the program is wonderful to see. So if you haven't done that yet and you're inspired to do it, we love it.
We've got RuPaul keeping an eye on Twitter today, so there's our challenge to maybe tweet out some of the things we valued most from being part of the school community this year. What's really inspired you or challenged you? We'd love to hear about it. So just in the few minutes we have left before we start, I'm going to remind you what we're here for doing and tell you how you can keep connected with each other and with the Horizons team. So today's live session will be facilitated by Helen and myself. We'll be leading the content, and we're looking at big ambitions, simple rules. We have a number of technical, production and social media leaders who will be here with us for the session, and you can see them all there. And there are lots of ways that you can keep in touch with each other. There are 4,500 people who've been taking part in the School for Change Agents over the past 5 weeks. So here are just some of the ways in which you can connect with them using Twitter. So the handle SCH4 digit 4 change, and using hashtag S4CA. We also have a School for Change Agents page on Facebook and of course on Instagram, Horizons NHS. So lots of ways to keep in touch with us. And I'm going to just put up the QR code in case it's useful. There you are. If you've got a smartphone and a camera, you can scan the QR code there. And that will take you to the sign up for the newsletter. So we'll continue to deliver news over the course of the year for you, so you can see what else is happening. Perhaps if you've got stories that you want to share. I mentioned earlier there's a couple of study groups that are going, who are going to be sharing some of their news and approaches. If you've got other examples and you want to share them with other change agents, then please do let us know. So Zara, I'm just going to come to you on the chat because I'm sharing the screens just to see if you want to say a quick hello to people. I can see we've got quite a few more joining us and 7 or 8 new comments in the chat box.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yes, we've got a very nice hello from Mina, who's on 3rd week of School for Change. And I love that because I think one of the most special things about school is that you can do it through your own pace, and you can start week 1 right now. So if you're not on Future Learn, there's my little plug to get yourself on Future Learn and do start the course as well. And also Gala, who's from Leicester Partnership NHS Trust, and really enjoyed the course which they finished last week, which is really fun as well. So I love that everyone's sharing their different parts of the course. We've also got Max Usman, who's always on our session. So hi Max, big shout out to you. And someone called Alison from Vancouver in Canada as well. So we've got an international audience today.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And hello to everyone. Hello Max. Yes, it's lovely to have your support always in the sessions and contributions into the chat as well. So we're nearly at time. I'm just going to give us another minute for people to join. Please keep signing into the chat box. Let us know who you are, what you're learning through the school, what more you want to learn and contribute. We'd love to hear from you. It is British, so an update on the weather, we can't avoid it. It's very, very sunny in London, so lots of smiles in the Horizons team. Do share from wherever you are. And just before we get started with the content, I just want to remind you of this. You can listen behind the scenes to how the production is put together, the Future Learn platform, the live sessions. We've been running a weekly podcast throughout school 2021. So just go to horizonsnhs.com/school and you'll be able to hear Kerry's dulcet tones as she makes us all laugh, takes us behind the scenes, introduces a bit of what we do, and that's known as Agents Assemble. You can also get it wherever you get your good podcasts. So team, I think we should make a start, and this is the final week of school, the third of our 3 live sessions. So welcome to the session, everyone who's joining us on Zoom, everyone who's joining on YouTube. Today, we're going to be looking at big ambitions, simple rules. How do we hold huge ambitions for change, the ways in which we want to change the world without being sucked into complexity as a negative force, something that brings us down? How instead do we understand complexity and use it to make us thrive as change agents? We're going to be looking at tensions in our work, how we balance them, what we're going to call polarities today, and how we use that energy to move towards action. We'll also be looking at leverage points, so how you can have a disproportionate impact for change. And much of that work will be around our mindsets, so the way that we approach change and how we think. So let me start by reminding you of this. We've seen this graphic in every live session of school, that we need as change agents to be holding 2 things together. One, our capabilities, our skills, our management skills, design methods, analysis, all of that good stuff. And we need to recognize that that in and of itself is necessary and insufficient. And on the right-hand side, which is where we're going to be focusing today, we also need to pay attention to agency. That's our sense of building belonging and energy with others, our ability to act, to embrace relationships that enable us to make connections and to lead change in relationship with other people. So I'm going to hand over to Helen to introduce the key concepts for today, and then we'll move through our session. Helen.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kathryn. And yeah, welcome everybody to the final live session of the School for Change Agents 2021. So what we're going to do, as Kathryn said today, is to amplify some of the points that we think are really important in terms of the content of the online school. And Kathryn said this word and kind of it made me smile. Okay, so those of you that are on the other side of the Atlantic, you would say leverage. Okay, us Brits, we say leverage, but it's basically as Kathryn did so beautifully. But it's basically the same thing. Okay, leverage is a very important concept for change agents, because what we've got to work out all the time as change agents is where's the best place to put our energy. Where's the best place to make change happen? Because what we ideally want to do is to intervene in a system or make change in the place where the smallest amount of our effort and energy can have the greatest effect. And I take part in so many workshops in the National Health Service in England and the wider care system, and we'll like do an all-day workshop, and we're analysing and we're exploring, and we're bringing loads of people together and coming up with some great ideas. And then we get to the point which is about action planning, and we just focus on a small number of ideas, and all those big ideas have gone out the window, because like action planning means focusing in on a few small things that often aren't going to change the world. So we want to change the world. We're change agents. So when it comes to action planning, when it comes to thinking about what we do, this is such an important idea. So just a little model I wanted to show you, if I could have the next slide. You know, what's key for us as change agents when it comes to leverage or leverage points is seeing what's below the surface. And we've had a few icebergs type diagrams, which I think are very useful in the school, because very often, you know, what we're looking at are the events above the waterline, if you like. So let's look at the processes and the structures and the systems. Let's do some process mapping. Let's redesign, let's redesign the process. Let's create a new pathway of care. Okay, it's really important that we do that. But you know what? Where the greatest leverage is, or leverage, or ability to make things happen, is going below the waterline. And if you like, the first level below the waterline is around our patterns of behavior. So what are people doing? You know, what are the how are we behaving? How are we interacting? With each other. What's happening? And then if we go below that, you know, what's the actual structures of the system? Who's influencing the way that we work? What are the relationships between the different parts or structures or flow of the system? And then at the deepest level are the mental models. Okay, what assumptions, what beliefs are people making? You know, what do people think about the system? You know, what is it about the way that we're thinking that determines what we do? And you know, very often when you go on a course or you do some learning, okay, very often what that learning will do is it will focus on, or it will help us to change events above the waterline or the patterns of behavior just below the waterline. But if we really want to change the system, we've got to go much deeper below the waterline, and that's where leverage or leverage comes in. And if I could have the next slide. So this comes from one of the fantastic articles that we had on the online school from Anna and Bernie. And you know, she talks about, if you want to change a system, okay, then there's 4 key leverage points that we can then helpfully think about, and how impactful they are. Okay, we start at level 1 and we move up to level 4. And again, if you think about the diagram that we've just seen of the iceberg, okay, so yes, we can change the structure, the pathways, the patterns, of the way that things are organized, if you like, the operational patterns of things. Yes, that will give us some leverage for change, but only a certain amount. If we actually want to create more leverage, then we need to look deeper, okay, below the waterline, think about how we can change the patterns of relationships and connections and how things come together. Okay, if we want to make more impact, okay, higher leverage, then we can go to level 3, which is around really focusing in around shared purpose, and think about what's the goals of our system and how do we align them, bring them together, okay, around our shared purpose. And again, I think that's been a really big focus in school. But if we really, really want to change the system, we need to think about level 4, which is about our ways of thinking, our mindsets, our paradigm. A paradigm, you know, is about a set of beliefs that influences what we do. And if we really want to change the system, okay, we need to be focused at the level of thinking, mindsets, beliefs and paradigms. And Kathryn and I, in terms of what we're going to share with you today, okay, what we want to do is really focus in on level 4. Okay, level 4 is the toughest thing to do as a change agent, but it's where we'll get our greatest impact. So Kathryn, back to you.
So thank you, Helen. You described it as the toughest area to change, and I think that's the first thing we need to acknowledge this week. These ideas are really challenging, and you know, the instinct, the propensity we have is to choose simple but wrong answers. So what we're going to ask you to do today is sit with us in a space where we're looking at this thing that we're going to call complexity. And I'm just going to say a little bit about that because it's a word that's become quite fashionable. It's quite in vogue. We talk about complex, and I want complex systems, complex ideas, and I want to tell you what we mean, how we think about that word, so you can kind of put into context. So when we talk about things that are complex but right, we're drawing a distinction between three things. So imagine an issue that you're trying to solve, and three boxes, okay? So simple, complicated, and complex. So a simple issue that you're trying to solve is something like baking a cake. Now, don't ask to see any photos of mine, but I hear that if you follow a recipe and you follow the formula, then essentially you get the same results every time. So something very simple like formulaic recipes will give you the same outcome. They're not dependent on changing circumstances, environmental conditions, at least not in their essence. Now, contrast that in your mind with things that are complicated. And I would say very few things that we're dealing with in health and care are simple or complicated. But an example of a complicated thing is where you've got lots of processes interlocking, like sending a person to the moon or building a rocket. And they can be very complicated processes. But again, if we build our experience over time, we can repeat the formula and we can succeed. Complex problems, complex challenges are not anything like simple and complicated. They're not, you know, a higher order of complicatedness. Complex challenges are when we apply the same formula, the same approaches, and we get radically different results. So think of it more like raising a child. You know, there is no one protocol or process that guarantees us success. And that's because the challenge is, as Helen said, based on mindsets, paradigms. It's the interaction of relationships and all of that happening in a changing environment. So here's another example from our current world within the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, on the left-hand side, you've got the process to follow in order to safely administer a vaccination. Simple. In the central part, you've got complicated processes interlocking the logistics chain for moving vaccinations from one place to another. Complicated. And on the right-hand side, we have a different order of challenge altogether. This is the complex domain. Vaccine hesitancy, persuading people and different communities to take part in the vaccination effort, you know, addressing and really hearing and listening and responding to people's concerns. And all of that work, which is behavioural based, sits within the complex domain. So that's where we're going to focus the rest of our session today. So Helen's going to talk a bit about the implications, and then we're going to look at the states of mind that we need in order to function as change agents in complex environments.
Thanks, Kathryn. So if we actually see health and care as a complex system, what does that mean for us as change agents? And this is a very, very good article that I think, you know, sets things out really clearly from Sonia Blignot. And these are things that all the time, when we're intervening as change agents, seeking to create leverage or leverage in a complex system, you know, these are things to think about in our change practice. So, first thing to say is that since the nature of a complex system is determined by the interaction between the members, relationships are absolutely fundamental. And that's part of the reason why in the School for Change Agents, you know, we always talk about, you know, change is inherently relational, and we need to focus on relationships if we want to make change happen. Secondly, complex systems are open systems. Okay, which means that they're constantly changing. A great deal of energy and information flows through them. So in a sense, you know, we don't want a contained, stable state in a complex system. Okay, it needs to be continually changing. And it also means context is king or queen. So you can't think about a complex health and care system as being independent of its context. So, you know, why is it that we've got some really good, new way of delivering eye care, okay, in one healthcare setting, and we try and spread it to other settings, okay, very often the spread won't work, okay, and that isn't because it's a complicated process. It's because it's complex, and we can't understand any health or care system independent of its context. Context matters. Also, as well as context, history really matters. And again, sometimes in health and care, somebody's got a new idea, or there's a new policy that comes along, or a new change initiative, and it's almost as if like previous history doesn't matter because it's the new thing, the new shiny thing we've all got to do. But we can't actually think about making change happen without understanding what the history is. The next thing is that where we're trying to make change happen in complex systems, very often what we'll see is unintended consequences. When you look at so many of the, again in health and care, of the quality standards that we have to stick with, we put quality standards into a system, and very often they'll have unintended consequences. So, very often, because people are trying to hit a quality standard or a target in a system, all kinds of other things will spring up of people gaming systems and other things that are happening that we don't want to happen because it's a complex system, or behaviors that may seem irrational. We also know that in complex systems, we should be prepared for the unexpected and to be very careful. And something that we may think in the big picture is insignificant, like a casual remark or a tone of voice, may change everything. And again, in a world that, like the world that we've been through in the last 14 months, where so much of our connection has been virtual, it makes it even trickier, because we can't actually judge, very often how people are acting. We're having to see it virtually, so there's even more danger, okay, that insignificant things can change everything. And the other thing about complex systems is they cannot thrive when there's too much central control. So central control is fantastic for complicated systems, because we're managing everything. But in a complex system that is constantly evolving, actually high levels of central control can have highly unintended consequences. So if I can have the next slide. This is one of my favorite quotes about complexity, and it's one of our friend Matt, who is on Twitter as Complex Wales. And I think if there's ever anybody to follow on Twitter for interesting content around complexity, it's at Complex Wales. And he says, complex systems are driven by the quality of interactions between the parts, not the quality of the parts. Working on discrete parts or processes can properly bugger up the performance at a system level. Never fiddle with a part unless it also improves the system. Okay, classic example of this, okay, urgent and emergency care systems. Okay, very often when we're trying to improve the emergency care system, we have a very big focus on the accident and emergency department or the emergency room. Okay, by over focusing on the emergency department, we can actually make the rest of the process of urgent and emergency care worse. Okay, so we should never think about fiddling with one part of a system without thinking about the bigger system. So that's my quote, Kathryn. I think you've got a quote now.
I have a quote, Helen. I love this one from Complex Wales. I have a quote that when I first heard it completely blew my mind. I'm going to show you the quote, and then what I'm going to do is to walk you through a story about adult development, how we think, not just what we know, that explains what I'm going to call inner complexity. And this is the quote. It's from Bob Keegan. He's a wonderful professor of education, worked for most of his career at Harvard University. And Bob said this: when we experience the world as too complex, we are not just experiencing the complexity of the world. We are experiencing a mismatch between the world's complexity and our own at this moment. So just think about that for a moment, because what we're going to do is move from the environmental factors that Helen walked us through, thinking about complex systems and our role. And we're going to move inwards into our inner ways of thinking and knowing. And I want you to think about this. When we experience the mismatch, it may be between the world's complexity and our own at that moment in time. So in the last week of school, we saw this. One set of researchers refer to this phenomenon as vertical and horizontal development. So when they talk about horizontal development, they are meaning that acquisition of technical competence, adding more knowledge and skills and competencies. And these are generally things which are transmitted through expertise, can be codified and learned explicitly. And these are critical for us to be able to function as change agents. But there's a whole other axis of development, and that is vertical development. This is our ability to think in more complex, systematic, strategic, interdependent ways, and we tend to learn it through experience. Now, the story of adult development as an academic discipline has many parts, and what I'm going to show you is a story in 5 parts. This is one set of theories around how we develop our ways of knowing the world. And as I walk you through this story, I want you to think about whatever it is you are trying to change in the world, whatever you're grappling with, where you may have felt that people are resistant, that you can't make change happen fast enough, that by the time you make the change, the environment has changed and you can't get enough grip and control. Think about all those experiences and be reflecting on yourselves and others in this story. So the story goes like this. In our early childhood, most of us, in developmental terms, in how we relate to and understand the world, we live in a magical childhood experience of the world. It's where time and space rules are inconsistent. Logic allows for the seemingly fantastical, the magical. And there's a sense that our minds are connected. Whenever I think of this space, I always think of my son at the age of 2. If I pulled the plug out of the bathtub when he was still in it, he literally thought he was going to be sucked down that bath plug, and it was terrifying. So the sense of ourselves and our relationship to physical space and our connection to other people is very amorphous. And for most of us, by our early adolescent, we pass more into a way of thinking about the world that has more autonomy and more sovereignty. So we may see us and them, ideas or thoughts, as this or that. We focus on our needs, our drives. And often for us at this phase, we can't really deal with abstract concepts. We're very comfortable with what's known, and we may have a disbelief in what's unknown. And for many of us, for most of us, in fact, by late adolescent and early adulthood, we're passing into a new form of development, a new way of knowing the world. And researchers call this a socialized mindset. So in a socialized mindset, we have a sense of us and a sense of that which is around us. My place in the hospital, my place in the workplace, my place with my friends, with my colleagues. We can develop abstract thinking. We tend to have loyalty to key ideas. We tend at this stage of development to rely on external validation and external ideas for driving our sense of what's right and what's wrong. So we don't have much of an internal compass, and we're still much more comfortable with what we can control. Now, for some people, not all, for some, we move on and start to develop additional ways of thinking about the world. And often this is where people become interested in leading change for themselves. Researchers refer to this as self-authoring, so being the author of my own story with my own pen. And in this phase, which tends to happen in adulthood, maybe early, late middle age, we develop a self-governing system, so our own rules, our own opinions that are derived from our own experience. We may, though, construct organizations and teams in our own image. So we value the strengths that we bring or that we've experienced more than looking at a bigger whole. Many leaders working in this space from this mindset will resist evidence that their beliefs are incorrect or incomplete, and will assume that what they've experienced holds good for the whole. So every mindset, every stage of belief has both its strengths and its weaknesses. And for a few people, normally the research suggests into our middle age and late middle age, we can develop other ways of thinking about the world. The researchers call these self-transforming. And in this mindset, we not only have each of those earlier ways of thinking about the world, but we add into that an openness to new perspectives, even those that actively challenge what we think we know and experience in the world. We may develop much more ease with complexity and ambiguity and the idea of change being a constant. We can become comfortable with things seeming like they're not reconcilable, and yet they're happening at the same time. So how we achieve more control, more value for money, how we do that whilst we provide better care, these things cease to be irritating problems to solve and become tensions that we need to manage and lead through and with. And often at this stage of mind, people start to become more resistant to simple ideas and simple answers. We start to look for the complexity and the subtlety in what's happening around us, and to encourage others to similarly hold a space without having to be either right or wrong. And you know, one of the things that's interesting about these theories is that none of the theories say that any of us move from one state to the other and leave our previous state behind, but rather, like rings on a tree, we grow knowledge and understanding, and all of those ways of knowing are part of us. And we can move through those ways of thinking at various points. So the key for us as a change agent is, how do I cultivate more complex ways of knowing? How do I think and work from spaces which hold the challenge and the uncertainty, rather than having to grip and control it? In developmental theory, they would say, how do we take all of these things that we're subject to, the environment, the views of my boss, looking after my team, supporting my family, and make them something that we can analyze and think about, so they become more like an object. They move from things that we're subject to becoming things that we can hold up and examine. They become more objective. And through that process, we're not just in the change and making the change, we're able to better understand the change and articulate it for other people. So let me just show you that in a recap slide. And this comes from the work of Jennifer Garvey-Berger, and I commend Jennifer's work to you if you are interested in these ways of thinking about not just how we look, but how we see ourselves and our relationship with the world. That for most of us, we start with a blanket view that becomes more binary, that then becomes something we can segment and slice. And that if we're lucky and if we work hard and if we're open to the thinking, we can develop ways of seeing the whole, even when things seem mutually contradictory. And within that, we find a creative place to act and to make change happen. So that's a very quick introduction to the story of adult development. And it's why Helen and I talk so much about not just what we know, but intentionally paying attention to how we think. So Helen, I'm going to hand back to you, but we might want to just take a pause moment in the next few minutes and hear from our chat box monitors.
Yep. Okay, do you want to do that before I start, Kathryn?
Let's do that then.
Yeah.
That's
why
great.
Why don't we have that lovely log background for the yeah.
Perfect.
For the feedback.
So I'm going to come to Zara. Zara, I can see there are a lot of comments in the chat box. I would love to know what people on Zoom have been saying.
Sure. Thank you so much to everyone who has been commenting on the chat box. It's been so busy, like you rightly said, Kathryn. We've got some themes coming out of the chat box at the moment, and it's around communication, connection, silos, and how the virtual world has affected that in the past year. We've also had things about complexity affecting the speed of which things can be done. So having the answers, but actually all the barriers actually then impacting how we care for our patients, and also that domino effect, so how one thing can ultimately lead to the next and the next and the next. But loads of comments coming in from the chat box, so thank you everyone.
Yeah, they're great themes. I mean, I really do think that what we've experienced together over the last 18 months throws a lot of this into stark relief, and it's one of the reasons why in the school we're spending more time thinking about big ambitions and simple rules as a way of cutting through complexity as change agents. So thank you for that. Bev, I'll just check in with you to see how things are looking on YouTube Live. Well, I think we might have your audio down. So Rupal, while we sort that, if we could move to you for Twitter and social media, please.
Yeah, of course. Hello, everybody. And yes, Twitter is definitely with high activity today. We've got lots of people talking about, how important it is to move away from the silo operation and to really embrace those connections. We've had lots of people retweeting the slide on the quote that you mentioned from Robert Keegan. And we've also had lots of likes and comments on some of the other elements that that you've brought in today. So there's a lot going on. And so, yeah, if anybody who's listening, please carry on. It's great hearing all these comments.
Fantastic, thank you. And please do, yes, screenshot away, share it. It's all open access content. And we'll share again in the chat box for you the slide share so that you can find the slides from today's session. So Helen, let me come back to you. And with that kind of inner complexity hat on, what does it mean for us as change agents?
Great. So what I was going to do is just talk a little bit about simple rules. And again, in a complex world, simple rules is, I think, are can often be a very powerful way to make sense of things. And being able to work and create simple rules is, I would say, a key part of our toolkit as change agents. So again, just thinking back around our themes today, leverage and leverage points, getting down to the level of mindsets. Okay, in terms of what Kathryn was just talking about, in terms of our own adult development and self-transforming mindsets. I think that complex that simple rules can be a very, very helpful way of thinking about things. So if we want a very large group of people, okay, across a department or an organization or system, to behave differently with everyone moving in a coherent direction, we can do this in one of two ways. Okay, we can do that in a way which is above the waterline, which is around changing our policies, our approval system, or our top-down cascade of information. And how do we do that? Well, we create really clear policies, and we have quality standards that everyone's got to adhere to, and SOP, standard operating procedures, and other kinds of operating systems. And we make sure that everybody in the department or the organization or the system, understands the policies. And in a formal system, in that way, with different people being held to account at different levels, we're very, very clear about what the governance mechanisms are and what leaders are being held to account for. Okay, that's one way that we can move everybody in the same direction. And in a complicated world, that's a very effective way of doing things. In a world where it's a closed system and everybody understands what they're doing and following complicated processes, that works really well. Okay, when it's a complex world, it becomes increasingly difficult. And again, those of us that work in the health and care system in England, when we think about, we're moving much more now to integrated care systems, okay, beyond individual organizations. Okay, how do we line people up across a whole system? So one way of doing that is through simple rules. And what we basically say is, let's identify a few simple rules, and let's understand that everybody is accountable for making sure that we stick to those rules. Okay, everybody interprets those rules, and we actually operate in conditions of much greater individual freedom, because everybody understands that's what the rules are, and we all stick to them, and we all move forward. And of course, in a complex world of health and care systems, we'll see both, and we're going to come on to that in a moment, because we're going to talk about tensions and polarities, and there's absolute tension between the two. Okay, but in an increasingly complex world where we're focused on systems, simple rules can be a very effective way of doing things. And if I could have the next slide. So why do we want simple rules? Okay, because rather than or as well as compliance to sets of standards and policies that can be very effective in a complicated world, in a complex world, we also want to identify a few simple rules so that everyone understands why and what they're doing. And what we want is a situation where everybody understands the simple rules and delivers them in their own way. And I'm going to show you 3 practical examples in a moment. So let's be clear about this. When we talk about simple rules, we're not saying this is how you must do it, like a policy. Neither are we saying, hey, this is a free-for-all, do what you want. Okay. What we are saying is, these are the ways that we want to work. Express yourself, using these elements. So our goal with simple rules is not to exercise control, but to establish the high-level principles within which we all operate. Again, it can be very effective. So I just want to show you 3 examples. So if I could have the next slide. The first example comes from our organisation, which is NHS England and NHS Improvement. Big organisation, thousands of people. And what this is about is saying, how do we want to work together to deliver our mission as NHS England and NHS Improvement? And I mean, I feel very proud, okay, to work for NHS England and NHS Improvement, and to be part of the national organisation for health and care in England. And at the same time, when you work in a big system like that, it can be incredibly frustrating. There seem to be a lot of rules, around how we can procure things. Very often we end up getting siloed working, how we can recruit people. So in terms of our mission, okay, which is a pretty important mission around, ensuring the delivery of health and healthcare for everybody that lives in England. Okay, how are we going to work together to make that happen? And I take my hat off to NHS England and NHS Improvement, because over the past year, okay, thousands of people that work in our organisation has contributed to the development of these rules. And there's 7 simple rules for how we want to work together. And they might look very simple, but I can tell you, hours and hours have gone into this. Hundreds and hundreds of people have been part of it. Every single word in these 7 simple rules has been worked through. Okay, so number 1, we speak up, especially when we see injustice and unfairness. We must do that, and our work is based on principles of justice. Secondly, okay, we celebrate the unique backgrounds and talents that each colleague brings. And again, when we talked previously about on the live session about belonging and how important belonging is to change agents, so much of that belonging isn't just come and be in our team. Belonging is about celebrating the absolute unique thing that everybody brings, so everybody can be their true selves at work. Okay, number 3, okay, is about compassion and caring. We care about others and ourselves, and we show that by our actions. Okay, we act in caring ways. Okay. Number 4, we learn from our experiences to improve what we do and how we do it. So, what we do in our organisation, everybody is focused on learning and improving what we do. Okay, number 5, we actively seek out others to collaborate in delivering our goals. We don't just work in our own silos. You know, we collaborate with others across our organisation and across the wider system. Okay, number 6, we encourage people to make decisions and feel that they can make decisions. Okay, and part of that, we want to delegate as much decision making as we possibly can in our organisation. And number 7, we work in smart ways, valuing everyone's time. So these are our simple rules, and there's some great stuff going on in our organisation around using these. So senior leaders in our organisation are talking about how they work in this way. Senior leaders have made videos around the rules that the ways of working that speak to them and what they mean to them. So we don't call them simple rules, but in terms of when we think about the ways of creating and working with simple rules in complex systems, they absolutely are. Show you another example now. This comes from Oldham, okay, in the north of England. And in terms of the COVID response in Oldham, they actually created a set of simple rules, and I think these are really fabulous. Okay, so in terms of our COVID-19, our pandemic response in Oldham, okay, we don't have pages and pages of procedures and protocols. We have 5 simple rules. Okay, number 1 is keep current. Okay, with guidelines, and we've got the national guidelines, and also Oldham is part of a wider health and care system called the Northern Care Alliance. Okay, so keep up with the guidelines is number 1. Number 2, listen to the science and defer to experts and data. Number 3 is coordinate, don't confuse. Number 4 is keep calm, and number 5 is stay kind. I think that's a fantastic set of simple rules. And the final set of simple rules I want to come to is the set that we've been working with as part of the School for Change Agents. And this is some work that I've led with Göran Henriks from Jönköping in Sweden. And again, we've worked with hundreds of leaders. And basically, what we're saying is, being a leader of change, a change agent in a complex world, wanting to create tomorrow today, okay, what are our simple rules for enabling change? And again, we've seen these extensively as part of the online school, and much of the content of the school has focused on specific rules. Have you also noticed both the NHS England and Improvement 7 ways of working and the Creating Tomorrow Today simple rules here? They have 7 rules, okay? And okay, 7's a magic number in lots of ways. 7's a magic number in terms of 7 is about the maximum number of simple rules that you want to have. And also, if you're doing group work, 7's a magic number. It's the optimal size of a group of people for everyone to have a voice. So if you're thinking about your own simple rules and creating them, think about having 7, certainly less than 7. 5 to 7 is a good number. Okay, so Kathryn and I thought it'd be a really good idea to maybe to use these 7 to just reiterate some of the things that we've been talking about. So number 1, defining our shared purpose. Okay, and we talked about our shared purpose. And again, when it comes to a complex world of change, okay, actually having a group of people all marching in the same direction with a shared purpose, I think is so important in a complex world. Secondly, okay, number 2, root our transformation efforts in a sense of belonging. And again, we've talked about this a lot in the School for Change Agents. And one of our key roles as change agents is to build a sense of belonging. Because again, if we can build that sense of belonging, a group of people who have a shared purpose and they feel that they belong, Okay, again, is one of the most powerful foundational things that we can do in terms of large scale change. Okay, number 3, we haven't talked about very much in school, so I thought that I would emphasize it a little bit more. And what this is about is predict and prevent. And we say start an earlier stage, like upstream, in either a process of care or a process of intervention. If you like, let's start earlier and predict, and let's prevent bad things happening. So if I could have the next slide on that. You know, here's an example, and again, the partner that I've done this work with is Göran Hendricks from Jönköping in Sweden, and Jönköping is a very special place. Okay, it's a region in the south of Sweden, and it gets some of the best health and care outcomes in the world. Okay, and how it does it is by having this one of the ways it does it is by having this very deliberate approach of predicting and preventing. So if you like, if you can see this triangular picture I've got here, okay, it shows their predict and prevent approach to change. You know, because you know, very often if you look at the pinnacle, that's specialist care. Okay, but that's only a tiny part of the system. And then next to it, going upstream, you know, going backwards in the system, is primary care. And again, you know, such a critical part of the system. But we go back further. Okay, we talk about support for body and soul. So how are we, you know, enabling people in the community to you know, to be healthy in their bodies and healthy in their spirit, you know, so all kinds of social interactions, opportunities to come together to take part in activity. And then we go upstream again and we have daily life. How do we support people, you know, to be well in their daily life? So when we think about predict and prevent, I actually had a quote here from Desmond Tutu, and he said, there comes a time where we need to just stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why people are falling in. And what strikes me is that what Jönköping is doing here is absolutely doing that, you know, going upstream, not starting with a care system, but starting with the reality of people's daily lives. Okay, that's how we stop people falling in the river. So so what I want to do now is carry on in terms of our simple rules. So number 4 again has been a very big focus of our work, which is about supporting people to build their agency, and we define agency, okay, as taking action that uses the power that we have to make change happen. Also understanding that when we're talking about people, you know, exerting their power for change through agency, understanding that people have got very different starting points in terms of the amount of power and privilege that they have. Okay, number 5, again, we've talked about this in school, but I want to emphasize this a little bit more now, which is around embracing contradictions and tensions. Okay, in a complex world, this is often at the heart of change. So if I could have the next slide. Okay, and you know, when we think about this, we talk about tensions or polarities. You know, there's 2 poles. You know, things that are at the that are almost opposite, that we need to do both at once. So yeah, paradox, tension, we can use a lot of different words. And you know, one of the key models that we've used in the school is about old power and new power. And this is a classic polarity, because you know, we're in a world as change agents where we have to work with both. Okay, you know, many of us are working in a formal system, so we have to be able to work in an old power way, okay, through the formal system, and we need to be able to work in new power ways as well, you know, current energy, bringing lots of people together around shared purpose. So, you know, how do we work with both? If I could have the next slide. And again, you know, what we've seen in the pandemic is so many polarities or paradoxes, competing tensions in the system. Okay, you know, it's been about, let's get a grip, let's gold command, let's get on top of this. Okay, needing really assertive leadership, and at the same time needing highly relational approaches where we bring people together in community. You know, focusing, one thing I think that the pandemic has shown is issues around equity and how really shining a light on health inequalities, okay, and different starting points. So we've got to tackle health health equity issues. And okay, what's also happened is that the very long waiting lists have arisen. And people are waiting longer now for care than they've waited for a couple of decades. So also we've got to think about high volume pathways of care and closing so we've got to think about shortening the waiting times and tackling equity issues. Work versus family, lives and saving lives versus saving the economy, the wellness of our people, whether they're NHS people, wider health and care people, versus the well-being of our patients. You know, we have to work with all of them. And if I could have the next slide. So, what do we need to do? And again, I think this really comes back to focusing on our leverage points. Okay, often we can find these contradictions very overwhelming. And actually, what we need to think about is the mindset that's going on here. Okay, so first of all, we need to identify what the paradox or what the tension is, and actually start to talk about it. And then we need to reframe the question. Is it really about a paradox, or what's actually going on here? And again, if you think back to our previous live session when we talked about the issue about mobilizing patients, okay, actually, how do we manage our daily operational and clinical work and get the very best care and outcomes for every patient? And so what we end up doing is let's kind of stand back and think about this and reframe it and do it in a different way. And when we stand back and we start to do that, actually we start to realize it's not just about conflicting demands. There's actually a bigger purpose here, and we've got to be able to say this isn't going to be uncomfortable. We can't solve it all, and we've got to stand back, see the big picture, connect, and search for new possibilities. And then I just have one more slide now. And this is about how we operate in the system, and maybe this relates back to what Kathryn was saying about the difference between people that are self-authored and the people that are self-transforming. Because how we get trained to be change agents is often to see ourselves as a change agent standing outside the system and saying, how can I change it? How can I help people to change? I am the change agent helping the system to change itself, as if the system was something that I was outside of. Okay, when we're truly self-transforming, we start to see ourselves as part of the system. Okay, and I'd say none of us operate above the system. We're not outside it, we're in it. We're part of the change. And again, one of the groups that I would really recommend to think about is the Systems Innovation Network, and some of the stuff that they produce, really brilliant. If we're actually self-transforming, if we're really changing our own mindset, and we're helping other peoples to change them, anything you intervene in changes the system. So one small change will change the whole system. Think about as many leverage points as you can beyond your own ideas. So don't think I can come up with all the ideas. Stand back and talk to other people. Okay, and what we've got to think about is we've got to work with the dynamics of the system. So thoughtful interventions, okay, that work with the system's own dynamics. And very often, you know, as soon as you start saying what's our aim or our goal, people start thinking targets, because that's the mindset we've got. So if we want a different mindset, you know, one thing that Anna Burney says, which is really helping me, rather than saying what should our goal be, say what's our potential here? What's the potential for our people and our system? And we've got to find where the agency is, and we've got to work with it. And to me, this is at the heart of leverage points. I'm not going to go back now and talk about the final two simple rules. Okay, number 6 is about transforming through learning, and actually, you know what, I'd say all of us taking part in the school for change agents is doing that. And then number 7, about seeing the small changes that we're making as part of a wider system of change. Okay, so important in a complex system, because if and again, you know, having a set of simple rules, okay, and making our small scale changes happen in that wider context, I think is a really great way of doing that. And if I could just have the next slide. So we're coming to the end of school now, and I just think, you know, it's been a very unusual and special time. School for Change Agents 2021, and it'll never be the same again. Or I hope and as it's a complex system, we absolutely know that it won't. So I wanted to kind of choose a quote that summed up to me, you know, what this year's about. And I chose a quote that comes from one of my favorite plays, which is Pride by Stephen Beresford. And this is from a character called Joe. And he says, you know, whether we march with banners or without, the important thing is that we march together, all of us. That's what this thing has been about from the beginning. And that is absolutely how it's going to end. Together, us, united. And to me, it just sums up the School for Change Agents 2021 beautifully. You know, change is relational, okay, and it's about cause, it's about purpose, it's about potential. And whether we're thinking about our own changes or whether we're thinking about the wider pandemic, okay, no one system is going to sort this, no one country is going to sort this. You know, this is about together, us, united. And yeah, and here nearly ends the School for Change Agent 2021. And Kathryn, back to you.
Helen, thank you so much. So 4,500 people have made up the School for Change Agents, and we've had the privilege of being able to share some ideas through it. We want to thank you for joining us, to let you know that the course remains live on FutureLearn if you've yet to start, or if you've not quite finished and want to dive in and see the last few case studies and gain some inspiration. Those are the details there. Zara, I think we have just enough time to pop back to you and see any final ideas from the final live session chat box. What's been going on?
There's so much going on in the chat box, and a lot of love for all the examples of the simple rules and how that can be implemented in kind of daily life, but also the final comment around changing the narrative. And I think that's really nice as well. So that's the chat box.
Thanks so much. So we have, I think, then just one ask of you, which is if you're using social media, if you're on Twitter, we're there too. Find us and let's share what our favourite bit has been of taking part in the school community this year. What's been your favourite part of the School for Change Agents 2021? Please do tag us in your tweets, or we're on Instagram and Facebook. We would love to read them. We promise to also respond. I think the last thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you to the team that made this happen, and most importantly to you for bringing ideas and energy to the school. And we hope to see you again very soon. Stay well. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye all. It's just been absolutely brilliant working with you this year.